If you like stories in which there are no positive moments and everything is very bad, then this is the story for you, with incredible twists and turns. This is my life journey that taught me a lot. We are a rather poor family living in a rental apartment in New York. My name is Mason, my wife's name is Harper, and our 9-year-old boy is named Benjamin. I am 31, and my wife is 29. We have always struggled to make ends meet, but we've managed to get by. Harper stays home to take care of Ben, and I worked as a tow truck driver. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us afloat. About a year ago, I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. I decided to start my own business. I was tired of scraping by and wanted to provide a better life for my family. I came across an opportunity online that seemed too good to be true. It was a startup looking for investors, promising huge returns in a short amount of time. Desperate to make a change, I invested all our savings into this company. It turned out to be a scam. The company didn't even exist. I was duped out of every last penny we had. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I fell into a deep depression. I didn't want to do anything. I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed some days. I felt like a complete failure. I couldn't provide for my family, and I had squandered all our savings on a foolish gamble. Of course, this only made things worse at home. The financial strain was immense. We couldn't afford to pay our bills on time, and debt started piling up. Harper tried to be supportive, but I could see the frustration and worry in her eyes. We started arguing more frequently. The stress took a toll on our relationship. We stopped being intimate. There was a constant tension in the air, and it felt like we were drifting apart. Domestic issues added to our problems. The apartment was falling apart, and we couldn't afford to fix anything. The landlord was unresponsive, and we were left to deal with leaking pipes, broken appliances, and other issues on our own. The pressure was unbearable. Harper would complain about the smallest things, and I would snap at her. Our once happy home had turned into a battleground. Due to my depression, I started showing up late to work. I just couldn't find the motivation to get there on time. My boss was understanding at first, but it didn't take long before his patience wore thin. One morning, after showing up late for the third time that week, I was called into his office and fired on the spot. It felt like my world was crumbling. Without a job, I had no way to support my family. When everything falls apart and you think it can't get any worse, life has a way of throwing another curveball at you. That day, I decided to visit my friend who promised to help me find a new job. As I arrived at his place, I received a call from Ben's school. Something had happened, a pipe burst, flooding several rooms, and they needed parents to pick up their kids immediately. I tried calling Harper, but she didn't answer. I had no choice but to go and get Ben myself. I rushed to the school, my mind racing with worry. When I arrived, the place was in chaos. Teachers and staff were trying to manage the situation, and parents were hurriedly picking up their children. I found Ben in his classroom, sitting on a small chair with his backpack on his lap, looking scared and confused. "Hey, buddy," I said, kneeling down to his level. "Are you okay?" He nodded, but I could see he was shaken. I hugged him tightly, feeling a surge of protective anger towards Harper for not answering her phone. I gathered his things and we headed home. As we walked into our apartment, I immediately noticed something was off. Harper came out of our bedroom, her clothes tattered and her hair a mess. She looked startled to see me. "Oh, you're back already," she said, her voice shaky. Something in her tone and appearance made my stomach churn. I had read enough stories about infidelity on Reddit to recognize the signs. Without saying a word, I pushed past her and headed straight to our bedroom. The window was wide open, and we lived on the second floor. I looked down and saw our neighbor, a man with a bare torso, pulling on his shirt. It all made sense now. "Harper, what the hell is going on?" I shouted, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, unable to meet my gaze. The betrayal cut deep, and I felt a surge of rage. I grabbed a few essentials for Ben and me, not saying another word to her. I took Ben's hand and left the apartment. But a little aside, my wife is a very strong woman. What she did simply cannot be conveyed in text format, so it was very hard for me to realize it. Well, maybe you have a person from whom you do not expect any action. That is, you cannot even imagine it. You know, it's like having a friend who fucks every day with different chicks, and then he says he's gay. I had the same feeling when I found out that my wife cheated on me. I decided to rent a small apartment close to where my sister lived. She helped us find a very cheap place and supported us through this difficult time. I told her everything about losing my job, investing our savings in a scam, and finding Harper with the neighbor. She listened patiently, offering comfort and advice. It was a relief to have someone to confide in. The days that followed were tough. Every night, Ben cried and asked where his mom was. I tried my best to comfort him, but I was barely holding it together myself. The betrayal had shattered my trust, and I was struggling to keep it together for Ben's sake. One night, driven by a need for answers, I decided to confront our neighbor. I went to his apartment, which was unlocked. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit with the strong smell of drugs. The place was a mess, with paraphernalia scattered everywhere. I found him in the living room, slumped over and clearly under the influence of something. He was mumbling incoherently, unable to form a coherent sentence. The sight of him filled me with disgust. This was the man Harper had chosen over me. I left his apartment, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Anger at Harper for betraying our family, and pity for the neighbor, whose life was clearly a wreck. But mostly, I felt a deep sadness for Ben, who was caught in the middle of this mess. Now I'm lying on the bed in our new apartment, not sure what to do next. My mind is a whirlwind of emotions, and I feel completely lost. I decided to share my story with the Reddit audience, hoping for some advice or at least a bit of comfort from strangers who might understand what I'm going through. After confronting Harper and ending things, my life seemed to hit one roadblock after another. First, my car broke down on a busy New York street. With no spare cash for repairs, I had to rely on public transport, stretching my already thin budget. It made getting to job interviews and managing daily tasks even more difficult. At my new job, things took another bad turn. I found out my immediate supervisor was a friend of Harper's. From the moment I started, he made no secret of his disdain for me. He scrutinized my every move and set me up for failures. I'd get assigned impossible tasks with unrealistic deadlines, and he'd watch me struggle, waiting for any mistake. The added stress at work made it nearly impossible to focus on rebuilding my life. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, never able to catch a break. Meanwhile, Harper's actions grew increasingly vindictive. She started spreading rumors about me in our community, painting me as the villain in our breakup. Her words turned some of our mutual friends against me, isolating me further at a time when I needed support the most. People I had known for years started avoiding me, believing her lies. One day, while picking up Benjamin from school, I overheard other parents whispering about me. The lies Harper had spread had reached even the ears of other families. "Did you hear what Mason did?" one mother whispered to another. "I heard he's been really unstable since the divorce," the other replied. This public shaming took a toll on me. My sense of dignity and reputation was battered by Harper's spiteful words. The confrontations with Harper escalated. She began calling me, taunting me about her new relationships, and boasting about how much better off she was without me. During one particularly harsh call, she cruelly suggested that Benjamin was better off without a loser dad, like me. Her words cut me deeper than anything else. I was already struggling, and her taunts made me question my worth as a father. Determined not to let Harper's cruelty win, I sought legal advice to ensure my rights as a father were protected. I knew the road ahead was long and filled with obstacles, but for Benjamin's sake, I was ready to fight. I started attending community support groups for single fathers, finding solace and strength in shared experiences. Listening to other men who had faced similar challenges gave me hope and practical advice on navigating the legal system. The legal battle was exhausting. Harper's lawyer was relentless, presenting me as an unfit father at every turn. They dug up every little mistake I'd made and blew it out of proportion. The court appointed a psychologist to evaluate both Harper and me to determine who should have primary custody of Benjamin. The psychologist seemed to favor Harper from the start. She appeared calm and prepared during the evaluations, while I struggled to keep my composure. The psychologist noted my stress and emotional instability, which Harper's lawyer used to their advantage. At home, the stress began to take a severe toll on my health. I started experiencing severe headaches and insomnia. The constant worry and lack of sleep were making it hard to function. I visited a doctor who advised me to seek therapy to manage my stress. The idea of adding another expense to my already strained finances was daunting. but I knew I needed help. I tried to keep life as normal as possible for Benjamin. We would do homework together, play games, and I'd read him stories at night. He missed his mother, and it was hard to see him struggling with the changes. One night after putting him to bed, I broke down. The weight of everything was too much to bear. "What did I do wrong?" I sobbed, feeling like I had failed as a father. The despair was overwhelming. I questioned every decision I had made, wondering how things had gone so horribly wrong. One evening, after another particularly tough day, I sat on the floor of our tiny apartment, tears streaming down my face. I felt completely lost. The isolation was unbearable, and I didn't know how much more I could take. If you've seen The Pursuit of Happiness, I have a vibe of this movie in my life right now. If I ever have time to watch it, I'll probably cry like a bitch watching this movie. If memory serves me correctly, the movie also takes place in New York. Despite the crushing setbacks, I found a moment of resolve after a heartfelt conversation with my sister. She had always been my rock, and she refused to let me give up. One evening, she sat me down and looked me straight in the eyes. "Mason, you can't let her win. You have to fight back, not just for yourself, but for Benjamin. He needs you." Her words struck a chord. I realized that giving up wasn't an option. I had to find the strength to continue for my son's sake. I needed to fight for his future, to show him that no matter how hard things got, we could get through it together. This newfound determination set the stage for my next steps, even as the road ahead seemed daunting and uncertain. My sister helped me organize my thoughts and make a plan. We went through all the paperwork together, making sure everything was in order. I contacted a different lawyer, one with a good reputation for handling tough custody cases. I was ready to take the next step, armed with new resolve and the support of my sister and the fathers from my support group. In the meantime, I kept looking for work. Any job that would help me stay afloat and keep fighting for custody of Benjamin. The support from my sister and the group gave me a glimmer of hope. Each day was a battle, but I kept reminding myself that it was all for Benjamin. He was the light in my darkest moments, and I knew I had to be strong for him. The journey was far from over, but I was determined to keep moving forward, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. I started researching more about parental rights and the legal system. I wanted to be as prepared as possible for the next court hearing. I read every book and article I could find, arming myself with knowledge. I practiced speaking in front of a mirror, trying to stay calm and collected, knowing that any sign of instability could be used against me. Benjamin and I fell into a new routine. Despite the turmoil, I tried to keep his life as stable as possible. We still did homework together, played games, and I made sure he had a warm meal every night. His smile gave me the strength to keep going. He was a resilient kid, and I drew inspiration from his ability to adapt to our new circumstances. Even as I faced mounting legal fees and the constant threat of losing custody, I refused to give up. I knew that the only way to protect Benjamin was to keep fighting. The journey was long and grueling, but with each small victory, I gained a bit more confidence. It's been 2 weeks since I last wrote about this here. I've been in survival mode, just trying to keep things together for Benjamin. But today, something good happened. I've been told I have a good speaking voice, and for a long time, I've been trying to break into the voice acting industry. Today, I finally made it. I got hired for a month on a trial basis to see how I perform and whether the audience likes me. For me, this is already a victory. It's a glimmer of hope in what has been a very dark time. Despite this small victory, money is still incredibly tight. We had some savings in the house for emergencies, and for me, that time had come because I'm not being paid yet for the voice work. I decided to go to Harper's house to get the money. I needed it to cover basic living expenses until my first paycheck came through. I was nervous about seeing her, but I had no choice. When I arrived, Harper answered the door with a cold look. "What do you want, Mason?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "I need to get the emergency money we had saved. It's not for me, it's for Ben. We need to eat," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She crossed her arms and looked at me defiantly. "I haven't seen any money. Maybe you spent it and forgot." I couldn't contain my anger. I slammed my fist on the table. "Stop lying, Harper. This isn't about us anymore, it's about our son. We both know the money was there." She flinched but stood her ground. "Get out, Mason. There's no money for you here." Furious and frustrated, I stormed out of the house. Outside, I lit a cigarette and stood thinking. The anger and desperation swirled inside me. I thought about how everyone's life seemed important except mine. I felt invisible, like no one cared about my struggle. I stood on the street for about 2 hours, lost in thought. I didn't know what to do next. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. Finally, I decided to go back to the house. Maybe if I talked to Harper again, she would come to her senses. When I got back, the door was slightly open. A sense of dread washed over me. I entered quietly, hoping to find her alone. Instead, I heard moans coming from the bedroom. My heart sank. I knew what was happening, but I needed proof. I quickly grabbed my phone and headed towards the bedroom. Pushing the door open just enough to see inside, I saw Harper with another man. I didn't recognize him. They were too engrossed in each other to notice me. I felt a mix of rage and sadness, but I knew I needed to capture this moment. I managed to take several photos of them together, right as the man was getting off her. I didn't care anymore who she was sleeping with. It was just another betrayal in a long list. I ran out of the house, clutching my phone. These were my proofs. I had what I needed to show the court the kind of person Harper really was. Back at my apartment, I sat on the floor and looked through the photos. They were clear and undeniable. This could change everything in the custody battle. But even as I looked at them, I felt a deep sense of loss. This wasn't just about winning a legal fight. It was about the end of a life I had once cherished. I called my lawyer and told him about the photos. He sounded hopeful. "This is good, Mason. This can help your case significantly. We need to present this to the judge as soon as possible." Despite the slight optimism from my lawyer, I was still overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I needed to clear my head. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. As I walked, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the legal battles VDJ. It all felt like too much. The day before the trial was a whirlwind of emotions and preparation. I woke up early, my mind racing with thoughts about what could happen. Benjamin was still asleep, so I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the notes my lawyer had given me. The photos I had taken of Harper and her lover were neatly tucked into an envelope, ready to be presented as evidence. My sister came over to help. She knew how important this trial was for both me and Benjamin. We went over the strategy one last time, making sure I was prepared for any questions Harper's lawyer might throw my way. She encouraged me to stay calm and composed, no matter what happened in the courtroom. "Mason, you've got this," she said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Just tell the truth and let the evidence speak for itself." Benjamin woke up a little while later, rubbing his eyes and yawning. I made him breakfast and tried to keep things as normal as possible. He knew that something important was happening, but I didn't want him to worry. We spent the day playing games and watching cartoons, anything to keep my mind off the trial. As evening approached, I felt a knot in my stomach. I put Benjamin to bed early, knowing I needed a good night's sleep. I read him a story, and he fell asleep with a smile on his face. Watching him, I felt a surge of determination. This trial wasn't just about winning custody. It was about giving Benjamin the stable, loving home he deserved. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I tried to calm my mind, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept going over my testimony, rehearsing my answers to potential questions. I finally drifted off in the early hours of the morning, my mind still buzzing with anticipation. The morning of the trial, I dressed in my best suit and made sure Benjamin was settled with my sister. I kissed him on the forehead and promised I'd be back soon. "Be good for Auntie," I said, trying to sound cheerful. He nodded, though I could see the worry in his eyes. The courthouse was bustling with activity when I arrived. My lawyer met me at the entrance, his expression serious but encouraging. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. We walked into the courtroom, and I immediately spotted Harper sitting with her lawyer. She looked composed, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I could see the determination in her posture. She was ready to fight. The judge entered, and we all rose. The proceedings began with both lawyers presenting their opening statements. Harper's lawyer painted me as an unstable and unreliable father, while my lawyer focused on the evidence of her infidelity and the impact it had on Benjamin. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand, my heart pounding in my chest. I told the court about the day I discovered Harper's affair, how I had tried to confront her, and how she had denied everything. I described the moment I took the photos and how they had made me feel. My lawyer presented the photos as evidence, and there was a murmur in the courtroom as they were passed around. Harper's lawyer tried to discredit them, suggesting they were staged or taken out of context, but the judge seemed unconvinced. Harper took the stand next, and her demeanor shifted. She became defensive and angry, lashing out at me and accusing me of fabricating the whole story. She claimed I was jealous and paranoid, that I had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. But as she spoke, her lies became apparent. She contradicted herself several times, and the judge took note. My lawyer cross-examined her, pointing out the inconsistencies in her testimony. Harper grew more agitated, and it became clear that she was struggling to keep her story straight. After hours of testimony and cross-examinations, the judge finally called for a recess. I stepped outside the courtroom, my nerves frayed. My lawyer joined me, a hint of a smile on his face. "I think we've got a good chance," he said. Harper's behavior on the stand didn't do her any favors. When the court reconvened, the judge delivered his verdict. He stated that based on the evidence presented and Harper's erratic behavior, it was clear that I was the more stable and reliable parent. He granted me primary custody of Benjamin, with Harper receiving supervised visitation rights. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had won. I had fought for my son, and I had won. As I left the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. I thanked my lawyer profusely, knowing that his hard work had made this possible. After the victory, I went straight to my sister's house to pick up Benjamin. When he saw me, he ran into my arms, and I lifted him up, hugging him tightly. "Guess what, buddy?" I said, my voice choked with emotion. "You're coming home with me." We spent the rest of the day together, just the two of us. I took him to his favorite park, where we played on the swings and climbed the jungle gym. We laughed and chased each other, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. We got ice cream from a nearby stand, and as we sat on a bench eating our treats, Benjamin looked up at me with a serious expression. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I smiled and ruffled his hair. "Yes, Ben, we are. Things might be tough for a while, but we're going to be just fine. We've got each other, and that's all that matters." As the sun set, we headed home. I cooked us a simple dinner and we ate together, talking about all the things we wanted to do now that we had a fresh start. I put Benjamin to bed, reading him another story until he fell asleep. I sat by his bed for a while, watching him sleep, feeling grateful for this second chance. The trial had been a grueling experience, but it had given me the opportunity to rebuild our lives. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that as long as I had Benjamin by my side, I could face anything. A month has passed since the trial, and things have started to look up. I was hired for voiceover work, and for the first time in my life, I'm earning decent money. I don't want to jinx it by going into too much detail, but let's just say that luck has finally smiled on me. I feel incredibly lucky and grateful for this opportunity. The work is enjoyable, and the pay is better than I could have imagined. With the new income, I immediately set out to rent a better apartment for Benjamin and me. Finding a place wasn't easy due to my poor credit history, but after explaining my situation to a sympathetic landlord and providing a few references, we finally moved into a modest but comfortable two-bedroom apartment. It was a huge relief to leave the cramped, run-down place we had been living in and start fresh in a new home. Benjamin was thrilled with the move. The new apartment had a small park nearby where he could play, and his new room was bright and sunny. We spent the first few days decorating his room together, putting up posters of his favorite superheroes and setting up his toys. Seeing him so happy made all the struggles worth it. However, as if trapped in a vicious cycle, after every small victory, something difficult always seemed to follow. Harper had been granted supervised visitation rights, and although it was hard seeing her, I wanted Benjamin to have a relationship with his mother. One afternoon during one of her visits, we sat on a bench watching Benjamin play on the swings. She seemed unusually quiet, and I knew something was up. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes downcast. "Mason, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My mind raced, trying to process her words. "It's not mine," I said flatly. I knew it couldn't be. We hadn't been together for months, and even before that, our intimacy had been non-existent. Harper looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. It is yours, Mason. There was that one time, remember? Right before everything fell apart. I stared at her, my anger and disbelief growing. You're lying. This is just another one of your tricks to get money out of me. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm not lying. I know it's yours. And if you don't provide financial support, I'll go to court. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why should I believe you? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Because it's the truth, she insisted. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I felt a surge of anger and frustration. You chose this path, Harper. You made your bed, now lie in it. She looked away, tears streaming down her face. Please, Mason, just think about it. I can't do this alone. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I need time to think this over. This isn't something I can decide right now. Harper nodded, wiping away a tear. Thank you, she said quietly. I'll wait for your decision. I left the park with a heavy heart. This new development was the last thing I needed. I had just started to get back on my feet, and now Harper was threatening to drag me back into the chaos. I needed advice, so I called my sister and a few close friends. That evening, I sat down with my sister Sarah to discuss the situation. She had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, and I valued her opinion more than anyone else's. What should I do, Sarah? I asked, feeling completely overwhelmed. Sarah sighed, leaning back in her chair. This is a tough one, Mason. If she's telling the truth, you have a responsibility to that child. But you need to be sure. You should insist on a paternity test. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair, but it feels like every time I take a step forward, something drags me back. I just want some peace. Sarah reached out and took my hand. You're stronger than you think, Mason. You've come this far, and you'll get through this too. Maybe it's worth talking to your lawyer, seeing what your options are. I nodded, grateful for her support. I'll do that. Thanks, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you. The next day, I called my lawyer and explained the situation. He listened carefully and then gave me some advice. Mason, if she's claiming the child is yours, you have the right to request a paternity test. It's the only way to be sure. Don't agree to anything until you have proof. Following his advice, I reached out to Harper and told her I would consider supporting the child if a paternity test proved it was mine. She agreed, though she seemed hurt by my request. I knew I had to protect myself and Benjamin. This was the only way to be certain. In the meantime, I tried to focus on my work and my time with Benjamin. The voiceover job was going well, and I was finally able to provide a more stable environment for him. We settled into a routine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of normalcy returning to our lives. After the conversation with Harper, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread and uncertainty. The next morning, I decided to do some research online about paternity tests. I needed to find out everything I could to protect myself and Benjamin. I spent hours combing through medical websites, legal forums, and even personal blogs. Finally, I stumbled upon some crucial information. A paternity test could indeed be conducted during pregnancy, as early as 10 weeks. This discovery felt like a massive weight lifting off my shoulders. Knowing that I could potentially resolve this issue sooner rather than later gave me a sense of control. I immediately saved all the relevant information and called my lawyer to confirm what I had found. With this newfound knowledge, I called Harper. The phone rang several times before she finally picked up. Her voice was filled with irritation. What do you want, Mason? Harper, I found out that a paternity test can be done as early as 10 weeks into the pregnancy, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. We don't have to wait 6 months. She hesitated for a moment. That's not true. It can only be done after 6 months. You should start paying support in the meantime. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. No, Harper. I looked it up. It can be done after 10 weeks. How many weeks pregnant are you? There was a long pause before she responded. It's the first week. I knew she was lying, but I couldn't prove it. Look, I just want to resolve this as quickly as possible. We need to get the test done. I don't have the money to pay for the test, she snapped. If you want it done, you need to bring $3,000 tomorrow, or I'll go to court. I clenched my jaw in frustration. There was no way I was going to give her a single cent without proof. I'll talk to my lawyer and get back to you. I hung up and immediately contacted my lawyer, explaining the situation in detail. She's asking for $3,000 to pay for the test, but I don't trust her, I said. My lawyer listened carefully before responding. You're right to be cautious, Mason. We can petition the court to order the test. That way we ensure it gets done properly, and you won't have to hand over any money directly to her. Relieved, I agreed to proceed with the legal route. The lawyer assured me that we had a strong case and that the court would likely grant the order for a paternity test given the circumstances. Despite the stress, I needed a way to clear my head and stay focused. I had recently picked up a new hobby, going to the gym. It was something I had neglected for years, but now it became a crucial part of my routine. I found solace in the physical exertion and the release of pent-up energy. Every morning, I put on my headphones, blasted some motivational music, and pushed myself through the workouts. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could momentarily forget about all the turmoil in my life. Each session left me feeling stronger and more capable of handling whatever came my way. It was also a great way to model a healthy lifestyle for Benjamin, showing him that even when things are tough, taking care of yourself is important. At home, I focused on maintaining a sense of normalcy for Benjamin. We continued our routine of playing games, doing homework, and reading stories before bed. His laughter and innocent questions about the world were the highlights of my day, reminding me why I was fighting so hard. In the evenings, after Benjamin was asleep, I would often sit at the kitchen table, going over documents and preparing for the upcoming legal battles. The lawyer kept me informed of every step, and I made sure to document all my interactions with Harper meticulously. This time, I was going to be fully prepared. One afternoon, while Benjamin was at school, I received a call from my lawyer. Mason, I've filed the petition for the paternity test with the court. We should have a hearing date soon. Thank you, I said, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. I appreciate all your help. Stay strong, Mason. We're doing everything by the book and we'll get through this, he reassured me. The days passed slowly as we waited for the court date. Harper continued to call, demanding money and trying to manipulate me, but I stood my ground. Each time I calmly told her that the matter was now in the hands of the court and that I would not be providing any financial support without proof of paternity. Despite the ongoing stress, the voiceover work remained a bright spot in my life. I threw myself into the projects, finding joy in the creative process and the positive feedback from clients. It was the first time in a long while that I felt truly valued and appreciated for my skills. As the court date approached, I tried to stay focused on the positive aspects of my life. I had a stable job, a new apartment, and most importantly, I had Benjamin. He was my anchor, the reason I kept pushing forward. Finally, the day arrived for the court hearing regarding the paternity test. I dressed in my best suit and dropped Benjamin off at my sister's place. She gave me a reassuring hug. You've got this, Mason. Just stay calm and tell the truth. I arrived at the courthouse and met with my lawyer. We reviewed our strategy one last time before entering the courtroom. Harper was already there, looking tense. Her lawyer stood beside her, flipping through a stack of papers. The judge entered, and we all rose. The hearing began with my lawyer presenting our case for the paternity test. He explained the circumstances and the necessity of confirming paternity before any financial support could be discussed. Harper's lawyer tried to argue that the test was unnecessary and that I should start providing support immediately, but the judge seemed skeptical. He listened carefully to both sides before making his decision. The judge ordered the paternity test to be conducted as soon as Harper reached the 10-week mark of her pregnancy. He also stated that no financial support would be mandated until the results were confirmed. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was a significant victory, but I knew it was only the first step. The test would provide the answers I needed, and until then, I had to remain vigilant. After the hearing, I called my sister to give her the good news. The judge ordered the test, I said, my voice filled with relief. No support until we have the results. That's great, Mason, she replied. I knew you could do it. Back at home, I focused on maintaining our routine and keeping things as normal as possible for Benjamin. The uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had to stay strong for his sake. In the meantime, I continued to document everything and stay in close contact with my lawyer. The court-ordered paternity test was a crucial step, and I was determined to see it through. Hello, everyone. A week has passed since all the recent events, and only today did I have time to write a new update. The past few days have been a whirlwind, and I needed a moment to gather my thoughts. After what happened in court, Harper was very upset. She wanted that money as I understood it, because she called me every day for 2 whole weeks, saying she needed it. Here's roughly how our conversations went. "Hi Harper, how's Benji?" "Yeah, everything's fine." "Ah, okay. Did you want something?" "Yes, $50 wouldn't hurt." The conversations always started civilly enough, but they quickly devolved into accusations. She'd go off about how I was just as much of a jerk as all men are, blaming me for her situation. "You know, Mason, you're no different than any other selfish man. I needed you, and you turned your back on me. You're pathetic." It was emotionally exhausting, but I remained calm and stuck to my decision. I couldn't give her money without knowing the truth about the baby, and I certainly wasn't going to cave to her manipulation. Despite the constant tension with Harper, I've started to truly enjoy life again. My new job, where I work with my voice rather than my hands, has been a blessing. The pay is 4 times more than what I used to earn, and I feel a sense of pride and accomplishment that I haven't felt in years. Every morning, I look forward to going to work. The creative process of voice acting is fulfilling, and the feedback from clients has been overwhelmingly positive. It's a world away from the physical labor and financial struggle of my past jobs. I can't go into too much detail about my work because I want to maintain my privacy. I hope you all understand that I wouldn't want anyone to find out about all this. Sharing my story with strangers on the internet is one thing, but exposing my identity and personal details is another. One day, after a particularly good day at work, I decided to stop by Harper's place to check on her. Despite everything, a part of me still cared about her well-being. When I entered what used to be our cozy apartment, I was shocked by what I saw. The place was a complete mess. The furniture was in disarray, the floor was littered with garbage, and the once warm and inviting atmosphere had turned into something out of a nightmare. There were 2 guys and a couple of women lying on the floor, clearly drugged up. The smell of stale smoke and something more acrid filled the air. My heart sank as I scanned the room and spotted Harper. She was lying on the couch, looking disheveled and distant. A syringe and a spoon were on the table next to her, and it all became clear to me what she had been doing. I couldn't understand how in just a few months, a purpose-driven woman had turned into this. The woman I once loved and married, the mother of my child, was now caught in the grip of heavy drug use. It was heartbreaking to see her like this, and I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and helplessness. "Harper," I called out softly, hoping to get through to her. She barely responded, her eyes glazed over and unfocused. It was as if she didn't even recognize me. I wanted to reach out, to shake her out of the stupor, but I knew it wasn't that simple. I left the apartment feeling a deep sense of despair. The drive back home was a blur. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, struggling to understand how things had spiraled so far out of control. I knew I had to do something, not just for Harper, but for Benjamin as well. That night, I called my sister and explained everything I had seen. "Sarah, it's worse than I thought. Harper's place is a drug den. There were people lying on the floor, and she was completely out of it." Sarah was silent for a moment, processing what I had told her. "Mason, this is serious. You need to document everything and talk to your lawyer. Harper's condition could be grounds for revisiting the custody arrangement." "I know," I said, feeling the weight of the situation. "But part of me still wants to help her. She's Benjamin's mother, and I don't want him to lose her completely." "We can figure that out," Sarah replied gently. "But right now, your priority has to be Benjamin. He needs a stable and safe environment." I knew she was right. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer and relayed everything I had witnessed at Harper's apartment. He listened carefully and agreed that we needed to take action. "We need to file for an emergency hearing," he said. "Given her condition, we have a strong case for modifying the custody arrangement to protect Benjamin." The days that followed were a blur of legal preparations and emotional turmoil. I continued to go to work, finding solace in my routine, but the knowledge of Harper's condition weighed heavily on me. I worried about what would happen to her, but I knew that I had to stay focused on what was best for Benjamin. Meanwhile, Harper's calls became more frantic. She accused me of abandoning her, of not caring about Benjamin, of being the reason for her downfall. Each call was more erratic than the last, and it became clear that she was spiraling out of control. I documented every interaction, knowing that I needed to be prepared for the upcoming legal battle. Through it all, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Benjamin. We continued our routine of games, homework, and bedtime stories. His laughter was a constant reminder of why I was fighting so hard. One afternoon, as we sat on the couch reading a book, Benjamin looked up at me and asked, "Dad, when can I see Mom again?" His innocent question hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also didn't want to expose him to the harsh realities of the situation. "Soon, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "We're just making sure everything is okay first." My ex-wife overdosed and was taken to the hospital. I was listed in her phone as beloved, and they immediately called me. The moment I saw the hospital's number flash on my screen, I felt a mix of dread and frustration. I really didn't want to go to her. I was hoping she would just disappear from my life. But maybe when you're a little child, it's important to have your mom with you. It's better than not having a mom at all, I guess. In the future, my ideology is that a bad mom is better than no mom at all. If you agree or disagree, please comment. I arrived at the hospital with a heavy heart. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit me as I walked through the doors, and I was directed to the emergency room where Harper was being treated. The nurse on duty led me to a small waiting area and told me the doctor would be out to speak with me shortly. I sat down, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor approached me. "Mr. Mason?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied, standing up. "Your wife was brought in after an overdose. She's stable now, but I'm afraid there's more. She had a miscarriage." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I felt faint and turned pale. The nurse quickly brought over a small vial of smelling salts to revive me. I took a few deep breaths, trying to process what I had just heard. What if it was my child? After all, I'm a Christian, and I didn't do anything to help my wife. A wave of guilt washed over me. I was tormented by all these different situations and what-ifs. The doctor continued, "She'll need to stay here for a few days for observation. You can see her briefly, but she'll need rest." I nodded, still in shock. They led me to her room, and I stood at the doorway, looking at Harper lying in the hospital bed. She looked fragile, a shadow of the woman I once knew. I stepped into the room and she opened her eyes, looking at me with a mix of pain and sorrow. "Mason," she whispered, her voice weak. "Harper," I replied, my voice trembling. "I'm here." She reached out a hand and I took it, feeling the weight of our shared history in that moment. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I've made so many mistakes." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part of me was still angry and hurt. "Just focus on getting better," I finally managed to say. After a few minutes, I left the room, feeling a deep sense of conflict. I knew I had to think about Benjamin and what was best for him, but the guilt and uncertainty gnawed at me. When Harper was discharged from the hospital, I didn't visit her again after that first day when the doctors called me. The guilt and pain of knowing she had lost the baby, potentially mine, was too much to bear. We went to court to settle everything. The court proceedings were grueling but necessary. I presented all the evidence of Harper's drug use and her inability to provide a stable environment for Benjamin. The judge reviewed everything carefully. In the end, the court granted me full custody of Benjamin, with Harper only allowed supervised visitation rights. It was a bittersweet victory. I knew it was the best decision for Benjamin, but it still hurt to see how far Harper had fallen. I would love to block her everywhere and start a new life. But because she has the right to see our son, I can't ignore her. Although I tried to talk to the court and ask them to fully support me because she is beyond help, and I can still make my son happy. My thoughts have changed, though. It's better to have no mom at all than a drug-addicted mom. As we left the courthouse, I felt a sense of closure but also a heavy responsibility. Harper walked away without a word, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Life after the court ruling started to settle into a new kind of normal. I focused on providing the best possible life for Benjamin. My job continued to go well, and the stability of a steady income allowed us to enjoy simple pleasures we had missed out on for so long. I was determined to give Benjamin the childhood he deserved. I realized that you have a lot of questions, and maybe I didn't cover a lot of things as I should have. but I was afraid that I might get in trouble for sharing all this on the internet. I want to say thank you to everyone, especially those who supported me. From a stupid and naive person, I finally found my courage, and now nothing can break me.